We're now in the grips of an inflation scare that has put a chokehold on the growth stocks, and it's been a nightmare for tech. This morning, it felt like we'd have still yet another ugly session for tech. Then we got this reprieve when interest rates took a breather for an ugly close, with the Dow ultimately finishing down 470 points. S&P declining 0.48%. NASDAQ did manage to rebound 0.56%, and that is important. See, not everything can rally. When rates tumble, like today, the big industrials lose their momentum, hence the decline in the Dow. But at least the cloud, the semis, the cybersecurity stocks could climb out of the hole that they're in and lead the NASDAQ into a rare patch of green. In other words, we rolled back the reflation trade for another day. However, after a crazy year full of unprecedented action, we're finally dealing with something normal here. I've gone over the last half dozen of these inflation scares, and I think the closest analog is the one we got from December 2015 through February 2016. Back then, the economy was heating up. Our economy is heating up. Our previous Fed chief, now Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, let us know that it was time. The economy was too strong. It had to raise rates. Had to raise the federal funds rate. Then as now, the most highly valued stocks, the ones that trade on their sales, not on their earnings, got absolutely annihilated for weeks on end. Emphasis on weeks. And remember, we're only like week 2. Of course, there's a big difference. Our current Fed chief, Jay Powell, has decided to upend more than 40 years of monetary policy. Ever since the late 70s, the Fed has been ruthless about crushing inflation, even if they have to cause the occasional recession in the process. But Jay Powell believes we're underestimating the risks of high unemployment and overestimating the risks of inflation. That was true even before the pandemic, and it's doubly true now. To a lot of people on Wall Street, though, that's just heresy. They don't trust the man. See, you got bond sellers all over the place betting that Powell will have to change his mind because the economy is going to get strong. As they see it, we're about to get a huge stimulus package that will hit right as America reopens for business because of the vaccines. So they think the economy must overheat. Therefore, we must have inflation, serious inflation. And inflation is a nightmare for people who own bonds. I mean, who wants a piece of paper that pays 1.5% when inflation could break 2%? You're losing every day. And that's why these people have been dumping bonds, and their wholesale selling always smashes the stock market. Remember, stocks are valued based on their future earning streams, and inflation erodes the value of these future earnings.
When the only constant in life is change, you need to be ready. This is the Man-Made Survival Show.
Hello everyone, my name is Jose Prado with ManMadeSurvival. Thank you so much for coming back to the channel and watching this video. I really do appreciate it because we're going to be continuing our talk about the economic collapse that we're experiencing here in the United States and how you must get prepared for it. Because right now, really, the United States is divided into 2 groups. One, which is the more simple one, is people who have not been affected by this pandemic lockdowns at all. All right, some people have not lost their jobs. You know, they have not had any pay cuts or anything. Probably the only difference in their life is that they have to put on a mask before they go into the grocery store, or they have to work from home. But outside from that, they haven't really seen any difference. So for them, there's not really an economic collapse, and they just have to wait for things to go back to normal so they can continue living on their life. On the other hand, the other group of people, they have lost their job. All right, they're right now they're unemployed. They are about to be evicted. They cannot put food on the table. They cannot pay for their bills. So the government intervention for them is a must, right? It's something that they're waiting for, and they hope that it comes here sooner rather than later. So that is the 2 groups that the United States is divided into right now, which is something similar that happened in 2008. Because unless you were involved in the housing market, or if you were involved in 401ks, the stock market and everything like that, you didn't really care what happened, all right? Because if you didn't have any of those things that collapsed back in 2008, it didn't really matter to you. But the difference between 2008 and now, even though they have a lot of similarities, is that the collapse of the dollar and its value is going to affect everyone, whether or not they're affected by it right now or not, all right? The people who have not seen any difference in their life, they will see it once the U.S. dollar loses its purchasing power. And the people who are already in despair right now, they're going to have an even worse time. So right now, really what you have to do, this is really the 3rd group of people in the United States, is the preppers. For the prepper community, whether you're under the ManMadeSurvival flag or not, what you really have to look into is really changing your perspective on prepping. Because we can no longer wait for that one event that's going to happen, that is going to last for 36 months, and then, everything will get back to normal. But rather, what you have to do in this scenario, with this, what's happening really, is that you have to get used to the idea that the United States will collapse into a third world country. It may not take us, but another 3 to 5 years, maybe even 10 years. The point is that right now you're seeing it, you're experiencing it, and it's only a matter of time before it gets here. So you have to make sure that you prepare right now. You have all the systems in place for you to be self-sufficient for you and your family. Because, yes, you may have food stocked up and weapons and ammo and night vision and all these other things, but if you don't have a self-sustaining system that is going to keep you and your family, your alliance, whatever you want to call it, fed, clothed, and secure, then you're really falling short in your preparedness. Now, if you remember the previous video I did to this one, which was what happened in Texas, Texas really showed us how fast it will be for people to be in despair because the system collapsed. The supply chain, which, as you know, I describe it as the food, water, power, and medical sector, when they collapsed, then everything pretty much went to hell in a handbasket. Those are the 4 systems or the 4 sectors that you really have to focus on if you have not already. The rest of the categories that I teach you in this podcast, they're add-ons to make sure that your standard of living will pretty much increase, stay the same, or, be better off than everybody else in the country. Now, it is my belief, because maybe because I'm a Christian, whatever you want to call it, that when that happens, if you have all these systems in place, all these categories in place, they're fully, prepped on and stocked up on or whatever, you're going to be a leader in your community. You're going to be the one that people look up to in this time of despair, and you're going to be able to take the Christian message, if you're a Christian, and help a lot of people not only come to Christ, but also to give them what they need in order for them to have hope once again. Because this is going to hit a lot of people like a ton of bricks, like a train. So if we prepare in such a way that we have other people in mind involved, then it's going to be better off for everyone, for everyone else, and you're going to be a very valuable member of the community. Even if all you're doing is giving people eggs from your chicken coop, all right? So we're going to get into the rest of the list that we did not cover in Texas, because in Texas, those are the things that we're pretty much focused on because that's what happened first. But on this one, since we're talking about a way of life that we're not experiencing here in the United States yet, I can promise you that this 14 categories will give you the edge that you're going to need in those days to have a better life than everybody else around you. Probably even people in your family. So I'm going to go ahead and put the picture of the list on the screen. So the ones that are highlighted is what we're going to be focusing on, okay? Which is alliance, plan, medical, tactical, and hygiene. On the previous video, if you have not watched it yet, I do encourage you to watch both parts because we talked on there about food, water, communication, energy, survival training, bug about, bug vehicle, bug allocation, and clothing, with more emphasis on food, water, energy, and clothing, because those are the things that were focused in that scenario that happened in Texas. But on this one, I want to talk about those because really, if you already took care of the ones that we talked about Texas, which pretty much shown themselves to be the ones that are going to be top priority in something like that, the rest of these are also going to be a priority, but they're the ones that are more likely not going to be used as often. Okay, so now alliance and plan are the first 2. The reason that is because once you know how many people are going to be in your alliance, you're going to know exactly how much food you're going to need, how much water you're going to need, medicine, and everything else. Everything under the list. With the plan, everybody in your alliance, in your family, whatever you want to call it, they're going to know exactly what to do, where to go, and how life is going to be afterwards. All right? That's the simplest way that you can put those 2. Now, for alliance, the easiest way to do it is for you to sit with your spouse, write down every family member in your family branch on both sides, and your and your friends. And from there, you decide who you want to be part of the leading team in the alliance, because they're the ones who are going to help you manage everything. Everybody else outside of that, they're going to be the working bees. They're the ones that they're gonna work to make sure that they have food. They're the ones that are gonna make sure that they have security. All right, that's where the rest of the people are. They're not less important. All right, but you just have a handful of people who you're gonna really Know who are the responsible ones that are going to continue the group on. Even if whatever reason, let's say you're in a firefight, people try to come through your land and take your food, and you happen to die, they're the ones who are gonna keep on going. All right. So that is the reason you want to make sure that you start with alliance, because you have to know who is gonna be the people you can count on. The plan, very simple. You know what you're gonna do, how much food, water, who's gonna take care of what, and what are the expenses. Now, medical. Medical is gonna be very important because people will get sick. You know, kids may break some bones. So whoever is going to be responsible for medical in your alliance, even if you're the only one there, you're going to have to know how to take care of a fever, because, you know, there might be an infection, a flu, whatever it is. And a fever can kill someone if it's not checked, especially children. If you have children, you already know that, you know, they get sick during flu season, and they can run very high fevers that they cannot, you know, get down with just simple Tylenol or anything like that. Now, let's say you don't have any Tylenol, you don't have any ibuprofen or anything like that. What are you going to do in order for you to be able to reduce that fever? Those are the things you have to know. Another one is how to take care of gunshot wounds, because when something big like this with an economic collapse happens, like it happened in Venezuela and other places, that people get violent because they want the food and water that they can no longer afford. If somebody on lands happens to get shot, you have to know how to patch them up and save their life. The other thing is, like I mentioned earlier, broken bones. You got to be able to know how to set them, or how to, you know, take care of it, let the body heal itself. If a hospital is outside of reach, that's going to be something very important to know. And finally, you have to know how to take care of an infection. That could be as simple as a cut that's on somebody's hand, wrist, or whatever, to something more severe, because that is going to be, an infection is going to be pretty much what kills somebody. And it is known that that an infection can kill people just in a handful of weeks if it gets severe enough. Okay, what you see in other countries, in a third world country like Venezuela, Salvador, whatever, anything, you know, Central American South, really, what you see there is that people get sick because they have a lack of hygiene. They don't have access to doctors and stuff like that. So if you have the knowledge now, being a rich country, then you're going to be able to take care of those smaller issues that does not require extensive, you know, operation. So just by knowing those four things, then you're going to be better off than very many people. Of course, you're going to have to stock up on the first aid kits like I have behind me. You're going to have to stock up on books and stuff like that with the knowledge because, you know, and you're also going to have to use the kits. For example, a sewing kit, or not a sewing kit. What am I thinking? A stitching kit. That's what I'm thinking. You're gonna need a stitching kit to be able to close bigger wounds so they are not infected. But you also gonna have to know how to do it. You know, you're gonna have to practice how to close a wound like that, and when is the proper time to do it. What do you need to do before you even sew it up? Stuff like that. Okay, those are the things that you can only learn by a professional. So I'm not even going to try to sit here and tell you how to do it because, you know, probably legally I can't. Now, the next thing is tactical. What we saw in Venezuela, in any other place in South America, in Central America, is that people will get very violent because they will not have food, water, and everything else that they need. They're going to have to venture off to somebody else's house and take it from them in order for them to be able to feed their own family or even themselves. So tactical is going to be something that you're going to need in order for you to make sure that your family stays alive. But it's not going to be like that forever. As dangerous as Mexico and all those places are, it's not like everybody dies every day. Yes, a handful of people do die, or, you know, a great number of them die, depending on where you are. But it's not something that you see people just randomly killing just for the fun of it. Things will stabilize eventually, all right? We're going to hit that peak where everybody's freaking out. There's despair everywhere. But once everybody knows exactly what's going on, kind of like with the pandemic, you know, once they see their surroundings, what they need, what they have, what they can cope with, what can they do with or without, then things will start to stabilize, and then they're going to be a new normal. And then there is going to be where the tactical is not going to be used as often. Maybe the government will step in and try to bring out a new currency or try to do certain things to make sure that things go back to quote unquote normal. Or even if it's not the same old government, a new government will come in and do it. All right. And then finally, hygiene. Hygiene is going to be the easiest thing you can stock up on, because all you really need is a way to shower and a way to brush your teeth. Once those two are taken care of, then everything else is going to be okay. If you can shower, that means that you can clean your body, keeping disease away from you, away from your skin. And if you stock up on toothbrushes and toothpaste and stuff like that, then you're going to have mouth hygiene to where you don't really need to worry about an infection in your mouth, which of course that can also be a killer. All right, so these are in a nutshell, very quickly, it is exactly what you want. Now, the reason that I started this way is because of the headlines that I have for you today. Because as you know already by now, the Senate did pass a $1.9 trillion COVID relief package, which you have to take advantage of that. If you fall in a group of people who do not desperately need it just to stay where you are, to be able to keep the lights on, to put food on the table, or from being evicted, if you're not in that type of despair, let's say you are where, you're still working, you're not making a lot, but you're still working and you have no problem paying the bills, and this is just extra, I really suggest, and would be, it would be beneficial for you to try to use this money, however much of it you want to use it, and use it for things that's going to set you up in order for you to live like you're living in a third world country before it happens. Because right now the United States dollar is still holding up its value. You can still buy a bunch of things with it. Probably you haven't really seen the difference in the inflation, but you can use this money right now for you to buy fruit trees, for you to buy nut trees, for you to expand your garden, for you to get chickens, for you to have, to build a chicken coop, to build a rabbit coop, to build whatever it is you need to build for you to have, food at your house. You can also use it to fix your gutters and put the water catchment system in its place. You can do a bunch of things with this money that they're sending you. Whether you're single and they're only sending you $1,400, or you're a family of 4 and they're sending you $5,600. Whatever the case may be, you can use this money towards that. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. As you know, you already know the drill. You already know this podcast is going to run more than an hour, and you're going to have to listen to part 1, 2, 3, however many it is, because it's not just a little bit of information that I'm limiting you on knowing. I want you to know all of it so you can know exactly what's going on. You have the bigger picture and you can act accordingly. That is the reason why I do this podcast for you each and every week, because you need to know this information and you need to take the steps for it right now. All right, so the first headline is very simple, and I'm not going to get into big detail. I'm just going to give you the parts where you really care the most. All right. This is from CNBC.com, and it says, Senate passes $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill. House Democrats plan final approval on Tuesday. The Democratic-held House aims to pass the bill on Tuesday and send it to the President Joe Biden for his signature before March 14 deadline to renew unemployment aid program. The Senate approved the plan in a 50-49 party line vote as Republicans questioned the need for another broad spending package. The legislation includes direct payments up to $1,400 to most Americans, a $300 weekly boost to jobless benefits into September, and an expansion of the child tax credit for 1 year. It also puts new funding into COVID-19 vaccine distribution and testing, rental assistance for struggling households, and K-12 schools for reopening costs. All right, so this article goes on to give more details about a bunch of other stuff. But, for one, I cannot read everything. And two, this is really the thing that most people care, how much they're going to get and when, right? So just looking at that real quick, the $1,400, they're supposed to do it before March 14. So you can expect that they're going to give it to the House. The House is going to pass it real quick. They're going to send it to Joe Biden, and Joe Biden's going to send it probably within the same 30 minutes. And then more than likely, you're going to receive your stimulus check by Friday or maybe even next week. We don't know. The point is that they're going to work on it real fast. They're going to send it real quick. And since they already have your banking information, you can expect to receive it by next week. Now, right now, what you can do is really look at how you're going to spend that money. Hopefully, for a system that is going to be, or hopefully you're going to spend it to set up a system that is going to benefit you if we go into hyperinflation, okay, which is going to be one of the things that we're going to be talking about today. All right, so the other thing that I have here in front of me, which is a longer article, is that now they're talking about giving a UBI. And what a UBI is just universal basic income. And that is very simple to understand. It just means that the government sends you money every week, whether or not you apply for it. You know, it's kind of like with welfare, you have to pretty much apply and be approved. With UBI, if you make certain income, pretty much like the stimulus and lower, you get it. You know, there's a certain threshold and up, which they don't. Now, I really do believe that they're going to focus, if they do a UBI, because, you know, this is people calling for it. If they do a UBI, it's going to be probably lower middle class and lower, because those are going to be the people who need it the most. And they do, right? If they're barely hanging on and they're about to evict it, yes, they do need it. And for a lot of people, that sounds like that's communism or that's socialism. But really, when you look at it, I used to be against it. But now I'm in favor of it. And this is the reason why. What opened my eyes to really agree to send people money is because, for one, the United States is already in deep trouble financially. And it's going to collapse eventually. So the money can be used by people, by preppers, who right now are going through a difficult time because, you know, there's preppers that have always asked, I don't make much money, I'm on a fixed income, what can I do? If the government does a UBI, those are the type of people who would benefit the most because they're already, you know, prep oriented, and they will be able to use that money to stock up on food, on whatever it is that they need. For the other people who are not really, who really don't care about preparedness, they're just going to use it to pay their bills and buy whatever else that they need. But because they doing this, you know, if they do it, it's not socialism, because the United States government already sends money to a bunch of countries all around the world. And what happened in December when Trump didn't want to sign the bill because of all the pork that was in it, you know, it really made me think. I mean, we are willing to send billions and billions of dollars to other countries, but here in the United States, they only send us $600. Even though they shouldn't even do that, you know, the government shouldn't be sending money anywhere and not give it to the citizens. But if they're going to do it, I mean, might as well give us some too. That is the kind of attitude that I've gotten out of it. And many people who usually would say that that cannot be done because that's socialism, they're changing their mind because they see that this money is being spent anyways. So if the money is being spent anyways, might as well send it to the people that need it. Again, we're already in deep doo-doo anyways. We're eventually going to we're going to hit the hyperinflation. People are going to lose confidence in the US dollar because we're just going to keep on printing. This printing phase, or this printing, you know, craziness that we're going through, is not stopping. It has been going on for a very long time. We have trillions of dollars in deficits. Deficits just means everything that we spend over whatever we make during the year. So if we already have deficits each and every year, not only because the government spends on things that we don't need, but also because they're just giving money away to other countries for programs. Like, you know, the most famous one was the one in Pakistan. I mean, well, then why not just send it to the U.S. families that do need it? Because, again, eventually this is going to collapse. So they can use it right now, the people who will be smart enough to do it, use it to set up a system where they're going to be able to be self-sufficient. And even if the government collapses, even if the dollar collapses, they're going to be able to continue on and not suffer as much as other people who are not interested in preparedness. So that is the reason why my thinking changed in that. All right. So the next article comes from time.com and really calls for people to get a stimulus every month until the end of COVID. And they have said that COVID is not going to get done until another 3-4 years. Bill Gates has gone out and he's talking about that it's going to last until like 2025, 6 or 7, something like that. As he says that with a smile on his face. But the point is that, let's say that they do that. They did do that. First, I'm going to read the article and then we're going to do the math to see how much it's going to cost each year. All right, so this headline comes from time.com, as I mentioned a minute ago, and it reads, Americans need recurring stimulus checks until the pandemic is over. The idea of $2,000 checks have exploded in popularity over the past few months. Georgia Senator Josh Ossoff and Rev. Raphael Warnock ran and won in large part on checks. President Joe Biden committed to introducing legislation for additional direct payments to families. While a one-time stimulus check is critical to help people in the midst of the pandemic, for a real and sustainable recovery, we'll need recurring checks until the crisis is over. Alongside unemployment insurance, a relief proposal at scale of the crisis should include the promised $2,000 check, followed by additional checks of $1,000 or more monthly, or at least quarterly, until employment approaches pre-pandemic levels. We can target this relief to families who need it, and will spend it to help those who are struggling and drive the recovery. The Urban Institute research shows that just one more $1,200 stimulus check could keep 8 million Americans out of poverty, while 2 more checks could save 14 million families from falling into poverty. Imagine what monthly checks could do for struggling American families. Direct checks targeted to the bottom income earners, half of households, would also ensure those same families aren't left behind, and would disproportionately benefit Black and brown families hit hardest. The economic condition facing most Americans are getting worse, not better. We should target checks for those who need help most and who will spend it to spur the economic recovery. But a one-time check will only last people a couple of months at most. To truly build back better, we need recurring payments until the crisis is over. People who are going without food, medicine, and electricity cannot afford to be held hostage to political games in Washington. They need steady and regular relief. It is the duty of our president and Congress to provide it to them. It's good economics and a moral thing to do. All right, so what they're saying here, all right, is that the people who are pretty much middle class and lower, lower middle class and lower, should really be getting stimulus every month. And they're talking about anywhere between $1,000 and $2,000 a month, or at least quarterly. But once you do the math and you start looking at how much all this is going to cost, this would have been a great program if we didn't have any debt. Especially if we knew we could get to the debt that we can get right now without any consequences. Because then, yes, people could be helped and things could be stimulated in such a way that it's not going to affect people in the long term. Although it's going to affect the economy the long term. And it's going to affect the goods and services that people are receiving in the long term. But when you're looking at the pandemic in the short term, right? And I don't know for them how short term is. Maybe for them 5 years is not a long time. But for the economy, it really is, especially when you're giving out checks like that. So what happens here is that you're adding to the national debt. So right now, the U.S. passed $28 trillion of debt. The real debt is over $30 trillion, not including the stimulus package passed by the Senate this week. So now that we have hit that milestone, right? Everybody's talking about it now. We have surpassed $28 trillion. And I'm going to do this live because every time I do it for the podcast and I go back and take the screenshot, it changes. As of this podcast, looking at it live, we are 28 trillion, 24 billion, 257 million, and then all those other numbers move really, really fast. So if we continue to spend money like this, by 2025, we're going to be, just under $50 trillion. That's not including the package from December, and that is not including the package that they just passed, that more than likely Biden's going to be signing at the latest Wednesday. So when you look at it, and they're talking about giving stimulus for people, or giving people stimulus until the pandemic is over, then, you really have to wonder about the math. Now, we're going to do the math, and it's going to be very clear to you how this is not sustainable. They may want to do it. That's cool. But for how long? How long are they going to be able to do it for real? Now, when you talk about trillions and trillions of dollars, and you have a blank check to where you can just write however many trillions you want, then it sounds like a great idea. But we have to look outside of that into something different, which is going to be the focus of today's podcast. And that's what I'm going to be showing you after we do the math. All right. So the stimulus, 160 million people will receive, 160 million people will have received the payments under the previous terms of the bill, but now about 12 million won't get it. So that's about 148 million people, and the government is going to have the exact figure. So I'm going right here out of estimates and close numbers with zeros. So 148 million is the latest figure that has come out, because 160 million would have gotten it, but since they lower the threshold of how many people will get it above a certain number of how much they make a year, it lowered by 12 million people. They wanted to bring it down even more, but they called timeout and they said, okay, we'll compromise at $80,000 a year. So $79,999 and lower, those are the people who are going to get the stimulus. Now, when you do the math, 148 million times $1,400, because this includes children as well, that's about $207 million. And when you really look at it, that's not a big number, not compared to the rest of the package. The whole package is 1.9 trillion. This is just a very small number. All right, that to be honest with you, if they were going to do a relief package for COVID, this $1,400 could have been a lot bigger, or at least the package a lot smaller. So when you really put those two in perspective, it's not a lot of money. 1.9 trillion compared to 207 billion, big difference between them. So really what they could have done is given, let's say, $10,000 to 160 million Americans, or 148 million Americans. That would have been a little closer to what the package is right now. But the point is that is not the focus. Okay? They're spending money on other things that we don't really need. And, California's getting bailed out, other places are getting bailed out, and these other programs are going to get stimulated. But the American people are only getting 200 billion of it. Now, if they want to do the UBI, okay, according to Statista, in 2019, about 39.98 million people were living below the poverty line in the United States. So when you do the math, right, 33,980,000 people times 2,000, because that's how many checks, or how much the checks would be, that equals to 67,960,000,000 people. Now, when you multiply it times 12, because that's a whole year, that comes out to be $815,520,000,000. Again, that is not a lot of money compared to what Congress has passed. Now let's look at the other figures. If they're gonna increase, all right, this is just the people living in the poverty line and below. If you include the people, the working people, which is lower middle class and down, that comes out to be 114,571,552 people. When you multiply that times 2,000 because of the checks, that comes out to be 229,149,104,000 and then you multiply it times 12 because that's a whole year. That comes out $2,749,717,248,000. Again, that is not a lot, is it? All right, so now on that one, that is a lot of money, and more than likely they're not gonna do it. If they ever try to do anything like that, more than likely they're gonna stick with the poverty line people, because that can go a lot further than the $2 trillion a year, or technically $3 trillion a year. Imagine if they were to do that, that would get things very, very insane. Now, hyperinflation happens for several reasons, and one of them is because of the money spending that we have. Okay. What I'm going to be showing you here is going to be when the signs of hyperinflation started, how much the national debt was, the price of bread, and how much an ounce of gold was, because those are the things that we have to focus on as preppers. For Germany, back in 1922 to 1929, that's when they hit the hyperinflation, right? But Germany's signs started in 1919. You know, they saw prices go up, inflation go up a little bit. You know, they noticed it in the grocery store. Stocks and everything like that were affected. Hyperinflation hit between 1922 and 1923. They only lasted in hyperinflation about a year because other countries intervened, okay? Pay attention to these little details because I don't think that there's going to be people who, or countries who are going to be able to bail out the United States later on. But the United States and other countries were able to bail out Germany. Germany was bailed out by the United States and other countries, and they gave loans to them. All right, and let me see where I'm at. All right, so the national debt for Germany in 1922, all right, was $132 billion. Today's money, that's $269 billion when you adjust for inflation. All right, $260 billion is not a lot of money, at least not for the United States spending budget. Because what we do, we spend $269 billion probably in a week. Let's say a month. That was the entire debt for Germany in those days, and they went into hyperinflation. The price of bread in between 1922 and 1923, it cost 200 billion marks. Marks is the name of their dollar. So 200 billion marks was the price of one loaf of bread. So if that was a one loaf of bread, how much would it be for apples, for tomatoes, for other things that you can grow in your own backyard? Let's say chicken, for some meat. Let's say, how much would that be? A lot of money. I use bread as an example because bread is the easiest thing you can buy at the store. One of the cheapest, to be honest. And the price of gold was 89 trillion marks. All right? So this is where I make the comparison with gold. If 1 ounce of gold was 89 trillion marks and the price of bread was 200 billion, the gold has a lot of purchasing power compared to the mark. So if you have gold in those days, let's say you have bullion, coins, jewelry, whatever it is, that you can trade that for the currency of that day, you would be better off. You would be a lot better off. Because 1 ounce of gold would have lasted you a very, very long time with how many marks you can get. Even though you would have been walking around looking like Floyd Mayweather, with a duffel bag or a wheelbarrow full of money for you to be able to buy your goods, you would have been able to do it and you would have been okay. All right, let's move on to another example. Hungary, I think that's how you say it. Their hyperinflation lasted from 1945 to 1946. Its national debt was 68.5 billion crowns. Again, that's the name of their dollar. That today's number, that would have been $3,153,034,929.50. That's how much they would have been in debt. All right, only $3 billion. Again, for the United States, that's spent like that. Back in September 2019, we were bailing out, or actually we were giving loans to the banks, or the Federal Reserve was, to the banks of, over $100 billion a day. And that was their whole debt. Again, in the billions, not trillions. None of these examples go into the trillions, even after you adjust for inflation. The price of bread was 5.85 billion bengo. And there was I couldn't find any record of how much gold was. But I'm pretty sure they would have been very valuable then too. The next one is China. China's hyperinflation lasted from 1943 to 1949. Again, that's, a handful of years, but there was intervention by other countries. The price of bread, I didn't find any data, but the price of gold, for 1 ounce of gold was 500 million yuan back in those days. So again, gold very valuable, and the same thing for silver. Zimbabwe, hyperinflation lasted from 2007 to present. So they've been in hyperinflation mode for 14 years. Their national debt is only $7 billion. Again, something the United States spends like that. The price of bread is 35 million Zimbabwe dollars, and the price of gold is 87 trillion. Again, with 1 ounce of gold, you can live very, very good in Zimbabwe right now. Venezuelan hyperinflation lasted from 2014 to present, and the major reason is because of the sanctions by the United States. The national debt is $100.3 billion. That is not a lot of money compared. When you compare that to the debt of the United States, it's nothing. The price of bread right now in Venezuela is 5 million bolivares. And the price of gold, as I've talked about here many times, it's $3,206,477,006.74. Okay, now I have other examples, but I'm just going to give you the names of the countries: Yugoslavia, Greece, Peru, France, and Nicaragua. Those are the countries plus other ones. You know, there was a bigger list of countries that have gone into hyperinflation, but they did not recover unless there was intervention from other countries. They had to adjust their currency to something else. All right. So I have here something in my notes that I wrote down, and it says the recovery from hyperinflation. Hyperinflation is ended by drastic remedies such as imposing the shock therapy or slashing government expenditure or altering the currency basis. One form this may take is dollarization, the U.S. or the foreign currency, not necessarily the U.S. dollar, as an actual unit of currency. All right, so this is what it's saying. There's two things that happens when a country wants to get out of hyperinflation. One, the government has to just completely cut all the expenses that they do not need. The first ones that always go is the social safety nets. So for all the people who have been used to getting the U.S. government's help with housing, food, and everything else, they're the first ones to go. So they're the first ones who are going to suffer the government going into hyperinflation and no longer being able to afford these programs. The other that they have to do is either come up with a new currency or adopt a different currency. Now, we know that the yuan is setting itself up to be the world reserve currency. And it's not because they wish it to. It's also, or it's not only, but also different countries around the world are seeing how much money we're spending, we're printing, and how the value of the dollar is going down. So they're starting to look elsewhere. And the Chinese yuan is starting to be propped up to be the next world reserve currency. So once we hit hyperinflation and the dollar is no longer valuable, we're going to have to either adopt the yuan as our currency, or we're going to have to come up with a new one backed by something. More than likely, it's going to have to be gold, because the world banks, they have said, or the central banks, they have said that if ever comes to that time, it will be gold that is going to have to be the next unit of currency for them to be able to come up with a new currency. Okay, so that's how things are going to be, or that's the direction things are going to be headed. So we really have to wonder, do we have to worry about the $28 trillion that we're in debt officially, because it's more unofficially? And the answer is yes. If you are dependent in any of these systems, as we've been talking about this entire hour now, then you really have to make sure that you set up yourself right now, while the dollar is still the world reserve currency, while you can still buy the things that you can buy, and set up your system to be self-sustained. Have your own water, have your own power, have your everything. The 14 things, the 14 categories need to be taken care of, so your standard of living does not change that much, even though, you know, the country's going through economic collapse. So you're going to need food, water, medical, tactical, communication, energy, survival training, bug out bag, bug out vehicle, bug out location, hygiene, and clothing. If you take care of those 14 categories, you're going to be okay. Or at least a lot better off than people are right now. Especially if you are dependent of the government programs. All right, so the next article that I have for you is this. So, just how concerned should we be about Americans' $28 trillion debt? This is from WLBT.com, and the article reads, America has a problem. Well, almost 28 trillion problems. The national debt has ballooned to an astonishing $27.9 trillion. To put in perspective just how much money that is, consider this. If you were to stack $100 bills on top of each other, $1 million would be around the 3 feet mark, about the height of a chair or taller. And if you keep stacking $100 bills eventually past the peak of the world's tallest building, going a little over half a mile into the air, this would be $1 billion. But we're going for $1 trillion. This would have you stacking $100 bills into the atmosphere and past the International Space Station. You would have to stack these bills 631 miles above Earth's crust. That would be the equal to $1 trillion. Now imagine 28 stacks of 131 mile high $100 bills. That's America's debt. All right. And with the next video, I'm going to finish this first part of the podcast because I see that we're really close to an hour now. And now that you understand how much money they're trying to give us, how much money is going to be spent, what people are calling for this UBI, what really makes a country go into hyperinflation and how to get it out of it. The next part of this is understanding velocity, the velocity of money, because that is really the other aspect that we have not talked about, at least in this podcast, that will help you understand why we have not seen hyperinflation yet. Okay, so I'm going to finish this podcast with this video. For me, it's going to be a continuation. For you, it's going to be a different video. But listen to it, and I'll see you in the next podcast. Here it is.
The same dollar can be spent multiple times throughout a day, week, and so on. Mike can use his dollar to buy a lemonade from Karen, who then uses that dollar to buy coffee from Peter, and so on. This is what the velocity of money does. It measures the rate at which a unit of currency changes hands over a certain time frame. So, why hasn't inflation become a problem after so much monetary easing or currency creation, if you will? Well, simply because, sure, central banks have been pumping a lot of money into the system, but most of that money is held by commercial banks in so-called excess reserves. For example, the US had a monetary base of about $3.7 trillion in September 2016, but $2.2 trillion were simply held as excess reserves. Therefore, with the velocity of money being so low, inflation isn't occurring. Had central banks given money directly to individuals rather than financial institutions, inflation would have most likely been considerably higher. The same way, if banks all of a sudden start lending a lot more to people, and those people use that money to buy goods or services, the velocity of money would skyrocket. Bill the banker will give Jim $1,000. Jim will use that $1,000 to buy a laptop from Joe's laptop shop. Joe will buy laptop parts from his supplier with it, and so on. As a conclusion, inflation doesn't simply appear whenever more money is pumped into the system. The velocity of money needs to also be included in the equation.
The Man-Made Survival Show.